December 16, 1944. The Ardennes, Belgium, 5:40 hours. The black sky trembles before dawn. From the forest ridges east of the Amblev River, thunder rolls, not from weather, but from 1,500 German guns erupting at once. Shells whistle through the dark and explode across American lines like rips of white fire. Snow flurries scatter in the shockwaves. Men of the U.S. 99th Infantry Division, huddled in foxholes near Lanzerath, wake to what sounds like the earth tearing itself apart. This is the start of Operation Wacht am Rhein, Hitler's last gamble to turn the war. And somewhere behind that wall of flame, a 29-year-old SS commander, Joachim Peiper, waits in his tank column, counting the seconds until the barrage lifts. Peiper's orders are simple on paper: break through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River, seize Antwerp. Simple, and impossible. His unit, Kampfgruppe Peiper, is the armored spearhead of the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, over 4,000 men and nearly 200 vehicles. But what he really commands is a procession of iron mouths waiting to starve. Inside his Tiger II, the air smells of oil and cold steel. Frost breathes from the gun mantlet. The tank's Maybach engine ticks faintly as the driver keeps it warm. They have fuel for roughly 50 miles of fighting, if the roads are good, if the weather holds, if the gods of logistics are kind. None of those things are true. At 7 o'clock, the bombardment stops. Silence for a moment, then the low rumble of engines as the entire column lurches forward through the snow-choked roads of the Eifel. Their breath steams through open hatches. The tracks grind on ice, each link biting into the frozen dirt. The first obstacle comes within hours. A single American reconnaissance platoon, 20 men of the 394th Infantry, has dug in at Lanzerath Ridge. For nearly 10 hours they hold the pass, their rifle fire forcing Peiper's vanguard to deploy, maneuver, and burn precious fuel idling in the cold. By nightfall, the SS finally overrun the position, but the delay is fatal. The sun drops. The road west becomes a graveyard of stalled vehicles. Through the night of December 16, Peiper's men creep past the wrecks of their own making, trucks nose-deep in snow, half-tracks skidding sideways on the narrow lanes, engineers trying to repair bridges blasted by retreating GIs. Fuel gauges slide toward empty. One Panther clanks to a stop, its engine coughing dry. Another runs out completely and is shoved off the road to clear the way. By dawn on the 17th, the freezing wind carries the smell of burnt rubber and diesel exhaust, thin and fading. The entire column is stranded near the village of Honsfeld. Peiper steps out into the snow. The temperature hovers around -10 degrees Celsius, the air sharp as glass. He stares west toward a cluster of dark roofs barely visible through the morning mist. Somewhere beyond that lies a promised supply point, but his maps show no guarantee. His adjutant, Hans Gruner, trudges up beside him. The lead tanks are dry, Gruner says. How many still running? 4 Panthers. 2 Tigers, for now. We've drained the rest. Peiper pulls off his gloves and rubs his hands together. They're numb, cracked from cold. He knows what this means. A mechanized spearhead without fuel isn't a weapon, it's a sculpture of defeat. He orders the column to advance anyway, men marching ahead, tanks creeping at a crawl. In the half-light of morning, they enter Honsfeld, a quiet American-held village freshly abandoned after the initial bombardment. Doors swing open in the icy wind. Helmets and ration tins litter the ground. Then one of Peiper's men shouts. Down the main street, behind a row of supply trucks, stand 3 enormous canvas-covered fuel bladders. Beyond them, rows upon rows of 55-gallon drums stacked like bricks, each stenciled with U.S. Army gasoline 80 octane. It takes a moment for the realization to sink in. They have stumbled upon an American fuel depot, untouched, forgotten in the chaos. Peiper walks closer, cutting through the frozen mud. He slashes one drum open with his knife. A sweet, acrid smell fills the air. Gasoline gushes out, gold in the pale light. For a second, everyone just stares. Then laughter erupts, nervous and wild. Soldiers toss aside their rifles, fumbling for jerry cans. The irony is biblical. For days they've prayed for fuel, now it's here by the thousands of gallons, more than they carried from Germany. Peiper can barely believe it. The Americans had simply pulled out so quickly they left an entire depot behind. He looks up, snowflakes catching in his hair, and murmurs, "A gift from the gods." But the gods are cruel. American gasoline is 80 to 100 octane, too rich for German engines calibrated for 74. The first tank filled sputters, its carburetor coughing violently before the engine seizes. Mechanics scramble to mix it down with leftover diesel, cursing in the cold. Still, they manage to refuel dozens of vehicles. The advance can continue. In the euphoria, soldiers douse wood piles with captured fuel and light them for warmth, flames twisting into the morning sky. They boil coffee on gasoline fires, laughing that they're warming themselves on the enemy's abundance. A few even fill canteens, joking about liquid victory. But Peiper doesn't laugh. He stands by his command car, watching the glow reflect off his men's faces. Something about the sight unsettles him. All this fuel, enough to move an army, and the Americans had simply left it behind. It speaks of an enemy not desperate, but rich beyond measure. Later, when a captured U.S. officer is brought before him, a young man from the 743rd Tank Battalion, Peiper asks, "Why leave so much?" The officer shrugs, chapped lips cracking as he answers, "We've got more behind us. Plenty more." The phrase lingers in Peiper's head long after the prisoners taken away. Plenty more. By noon, Kampfgruppe Peiper is moving again. Engines roar back to life, black smoke belching from exhausts. They roll west through the winding valleys, past the frozen bodies of their own who fell in the night. The roads glisten with slush and oil. Above them, clouds drift low and gray, hiding Allied aircraft that will soon return once the weather clears. Each tank carries about 200 gallons, enough for maybe 20 miles. It's a temporary reprieve. But morale surges. The men sing under their breath, half prayer, half defiance. For a moment, it feels like the Ardennes itself is giving them a second chance. Yet Peiper's unease won't fade. As he leans in the hatch, snow striking his face, he studies the map spread across his knee. The route to the Meuse winds through a maze of small roads, Stavelot, Trois-Ponts, L'Église, and every bridge, every bottleneck will bleed fuel. He can already see the numbers failing to add up. When night falls again on December 17th, the wind howls through the pines. The column halts to regroup near the burned-out skeleton of a U.S. truck. Peiper climbs down and walks to the edge of the woods. In the distance, the sky flickers orange, the reflection of their campfires dancing on the snow. The air still carries the faint chemical sweetness of American gasoline. He thinks of the strange paradox of it all, their survival now depends on the very thing that defines the enemy's power. Behind every Allied tank and bomber lies an ocean of oil, an empire of refineries and pipelines. Germany, for all its courage, fights on fumes and faith. In his diary that night, one of his officers will write, "We have fuel again, but it feels borrowed." The enemy's strength is measured in gallons. Peiper folds his map, listens to the distant engines idling, and wonders how long before they're silent again. Tomorrow they'll push for Stavelot. The road will narrow. The fuel will thin. And the fire that saved them today will soon become the fire that consumes everything. Summer, 1944. 6 months before Honsfeld. Albert Speer sits in the Chancellery map room, his pen motionless above a sheet of fuel production figures. The paper trembles slightly from distant explosions, the sound of Allied bombers over Leipzig. Each raid tears another hole in Germany's arteries. The Reich's synthetic fuel empire, the miracle of coal turned into gasoline, is bleeding to death. Speer knows it. His engineers at Luna, Politz, and Bolin send frantic telegrams daily. Allied bombers have reduced refineries to twisted skeletons of pipes. Of the 316,000 barrels once produced weekly, barely a tenth survives. Across from him, Hitler listens without hearing. His eyes are fixed not on the numbers but on the wall map, a bright red line stretching westward across Belgium. Antwerp. The Meuse. The dream of splitting the Allied armies in two. Mein Führer, Speer says quietly, our fuel reserves can no longer sustain a major offensive. Even defensive operations are, he stops. Hitler turns his gaze, flat and glassy. We shall take the enemy's fuel. That is the plan. Speer nods, but the words fall like stones in his stomach. Even the mathematics of hope are failing. In the months that follow, the numbers spiral down like dying engine RPMs, Luftwaffe pilot training hours cut by half. Kriegsmarine patrols cancelled. Armored divisions reduced to ghost units, their tanks hidden in forests waiting for fuel that never comes. By November 1944, the Reich's total fuel reserves are less than 10% of Allied weekly consumption. German synthetic plants, starved of hydrogen, output less each day. But in the West, across the Channel, the Allies are drowning in abundance. From the white cliffs of Dover to the docks of Cherbourg, the pipelines of Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, pump nearly 1 million gallons a day across the seabed. From those lines flow the arteries of Allied movement, the Red Ball Express, 6,000 trucks strong, roaring 24 hours a day between Cherbourg and the front. Each convoy burns through more fuel than Peiper's entire Kampfgruppe could carry. And yet, the Allies never run dry. Their refineries at Abadan, Port Arthur, and Baton Rouge ship tankers across the Atlantic so full they ride low in the water, decks awash in gasoline spray. In an office in Washington, a logistics clerk records the figure that Speer would have killed to believe. By late 1944, the United States produces nearly 1.8 billion barrels of oil per year, over 50% of the world's total. Germany's best month barely touches 33 million. This is not just industrial superiority, it is the silent weapon behind every tank tread and bomber wing. Back in the Ardennes, December 17, 1944, Peiper doesn't know the full scale of it, but he can feel it. After Honsfeld, as his column snakes westward through the snow, he begins running the numbers in his head. Each Tiger II gulps roughly 2.5 gallons of fuel per mile. A Panther, 1.5. His entire column, tanks, trucks, armored personnel carriers, burns almost 10,000 gallons for every 20 miles. They captured around 50,000 at Honsfeld. Simple math tells him, 5 more towns, maybe, before they're dry again. The Meuse is 80 miles away. Even at his most optimistic, it doesn't add up. At 8 o'clock that morning, a radio crackles in his command car. The voice of his superior, General Sepp Dietrich, comes through the static, hold nothing back, Peiper. You are the Speer. The Führer expects the Meuse. Peiper answers, Jol, though he knows the promise is a lie. The Speer may shine, but it has no shaft to drive it forward. His adjutant, Hans Gruner, sits across from him, scrawling notes on a clipboard. If we could seize another American depot, Peiper interrupts. They won't leave 2 in a row. The first was luck. Outside, the tanks growl through the narrow valleys. The men's faces are raw from wind and soot. Each hill climb costs gallons they cannot spare. He studies his map again, tracing a finger over the dotted roads to Stavelot. His engineers warn that bridges ahead are weak, that every detour adds miles. He calculates quietly. Every mile means 200 more gallons. Every delay means 10 engines silent. Behind them, the war machine of the Reich groans in agony. Fuel convoys struggle up icy roads from Cologne, their drums half empty. Allied fighter bombers, grounded by weather now, will soon return with the first break in the clouds. When that happens, every truck, every depot, every moving shadow will burn. Far from the front, in a concrete bunker near Kassel, Major Friedrich Zimmermann, chief of the 6th Panzer Army's fuel logistics, works by lantern light. He knows Peiper's situation without hearing from him. Every Kampfgruppe is in the same trap, speed demanded by commanders, mobility destroyed by arithmetic. His desk is stacked with requests stamped dringend, urgent. But the supply lines are fantasies drawn on frozen mud. Allied bombers have cut railways. Synthetic fuel trains lie scattered like toys across the Rhineland. Zimmermann writes one final note in his logbook: offensive dependent entirely on captured fuel. Probability of success less than 10%. It is a quiet confession, read by no one in time. That night, Peiper halts his column in a small clearing. The engines shut down one by one, leaving a vacuum of silence. Only the sound of snowflakes hitting metal remains. He steps out, looking over the frozen shapes of his tanks. Some crews sleep inside, using gasoline-soaked rags for heat. Others huddle by small fires, eyes hollow. They know their situation better than any staff officer. "Do you believe," one gunner asks his comrade, "that this war is decided not by bullets, but by fuel?" His friend laughs weakly. "Then it was decided before we were born." Peiper overhears them. He doesn't interrupt. He knows they're right. The next morning, December 18th, dawn brings a grim blue light. Peiper's column begins to move again, toward Stavelot. Each tank leaves behind dark stains of leaked fuel in the snow. The smell of gasoline hangs heavy, American fuel, thick and sweet. At the head of the formation, Peiper feels a rare flicker of pride. Despite the odds, despite the shortages, his men advance with precision. The engines roar like a heartbeat in the valley. But beneath that rhythm lies dread, the same dread Speer had months earlier, when he stared at the graphs falling toward zero. Peiper thinks of the men who built the Tigers and Panthers, the engineers who believed in steel as salvation. He thinks of their meticulous craftsmanship, engines that could crush concrete and climb mountains. Yet all that brilliance means nothing without the one invisible thing that powers it. In that moment, the war feels less like a clash of armies and more like a contest between two oceans, one of metal, one of oil. And Germany's tide has already receded. Back in Berlin, as Peiper fights west, Albert Speer receives a new report. It lists Germany's remaining fuel stocks: aviation, 150,000 tons, motor gasoline, 100,000, diesel, 50,000. Less than 3 weeks' supply. The report ends with a single line, typed in gray ribbon ink: no reserves for contingency. Speer folds it carefully and slides it into his briefcase. He will show it to Hitler, knowing it changes nothing. When he does, the Führer's response is simple: then we must capture Antwerp faster. There is no reply to that. As Peiper's column crawls closer to Stavelot that evening, a low fog settles across the river valleys. Men ride on tank hulls, rifles frozen to their gloves. The fuel gauges dance at the halfway mark again. Every mile, the anxiety grows, not fear of enemy fire, but fear of silence. When a tank runs dry, the sound of its engine dying feels like a heartbeat stopping. Each time, Peiper orders the crew to abandon it, strip the machine guns, and climb aboard another. By nightfall, the once proud column has become a skeleton of itself. The fields are littered with dark hulks, their exhausts still steaming faintly. Peiper looks back at them, knowing what he's leaving behind: a trail of mechanical corpses marking the limits of the Reich's reach. He doesn't say it aloud, but the thought is clear. The war isn't being lost in the trenches or the skies, it's being lost at the pump. Somewhere far away, the Allies are loading tankers, fueling jeeps, and burning excess gasoline just to keep it from freezing. Somewhere, a soldier throws a cigarette onto a puddle of it, watching it ignite for fun. And here, in the Ardennes, the German spearhead that was meant to change the war crawls forward on stolen fumes. When Peiper stops for the night, the snow begins again, heavy and relentless. He sits in his half-track, the windows frosted over, listening to the sound of a distant engine failing to start. He thinks of his orders, of Hitler's voice on the radio, of the endless promises of reserves coming tomorrow. He opens his notebook and writes, "We have the men. We have the weapons. But without fuel, we have only stories of power. Outside, a mechanic curses, another panther won't start. The sound echoes into the forest. Tomorrow, they'll reach Stavelot. There, the real fire will begin, the burning of millions of gallons, and with it, the last illusions of victory. December 17, 1944. Afternoon. The road to Stavelot glistens like black glass beneath a skin of melting snow. The sound of engines bounces off the forested slopes, a deep metallic growl swallowed by mist. Peiper's column advances slowly, every vehicle drinking greedily from its ration of stolen fuel. The men have learned to listen to the pitch of the engines. When it dips too low, it means starvation. When it sputters, someone begins to pray. They reach the village of Bognes, just south of Malmedy, where a group of captured American soldiers stands in the road under guard. The sun hangs low, blood orange through the haze. It will be known later as the Malmedy Massacre, a name carved into the memory of the war. But for now, it's only confusion and rage. Shouts. A single shot. Then many. The air cracks with gunfire that carries for miles. Farther down the line, Peiper hears it but doesn't stop. His focus is ahead, always ahead. Every minute spent idling burns more of what he cannot replace. The column must keep moving or freeze in place. By nightfall, they reach the edge of Stavelot, a town straddling the Amblev River, its narrow bridge the only path west. Beyond it lies the real prize, an Allied fuel depot holding over 2 million gallons. Peiper's men don't yet know its scale, only that American engineers built vast tank farms here to feed the front. The thought spreads like electricity through the ranks: if they capture that depot, they can fuel the entire 1st SS Panzer Division. Maybe even reach the Meuse. Snow begins to fall again as scouts move ahead. The air smells faintly of gasoline, a promise carried on the wind. At the same hour, a few miles away, U.S. Army engineers of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion receive their orders. Destroy the Stavelot depot. Leave nothing for the Germans. Captain John Brewster reads the message twice, lips tightening. He looks out at the rows of massive cylindrical tanks gleaming under a layer of frost. 2.2 million gallons of high-octane fuel, enough to power an army for weeks. The thought of setting it alight feels like madness, but orders are orders. They begin wiring charges. Tech Sergeant Paul Soles carries the first crate of dynamite, his face blank beneath a layer of soot. He mutters, "We're burning what half of Europe's fighting for." By midnight, the work is done. Brewster hesitates for a moment, staring at the stillness. Snow drifts across the tracks, settling on the drums. The silence feels wrong, like the breath before a scream. He pulls the pin on his grenade, lets it clink against the metal casing of a tank, and turns away. The explosion that follows is biblical. Flames erupt in a column that punches through the low clouds. The shockwave ripples across the valley, flattening fences, shattering windows in the town below. The night becomes day for a heartbeat, then black again as the fire swallows itself and roars to life. In his Tiger II a mile away, Peiper sees the orange reflection bloom in the snow. For a moment, his men cheer, they think it's their artillery. Then they realize what it means. The fuel. Their fuel. Gone. The next morning, December 18th, the smoke still hangs over the valley, thick and black, smelling of burnt oil and scorched earth. The sky glows faintly red where the depot still burns. Peiper drives through Stavelot, the streets lined with wrecked American vehicles. Civilians hide in basements as SS troops pass by, faces blackened with soot. The bridge over the Amblev is still intact, but on the far bank, U.S. engineers have flooded the approaches. The river runs high, cold, and fast. They cross anyway, engines screaming in low gear. The first Tiger makes it. The second stalls mid-bridge, caught in debris. Men rush to push it clear as artillery shells begin to fall. The echo of explosions rolls through the valley, mixing with the endless crackle of the fire still raging to the south. By noon, Peiper's spearhead claws its way into the western outskirts. His men are exhausted, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Their uniforms stink of gasoline and smoke. The radios hiss with half-words and static. Every message from headquarters is the same: advance. Reach the Meuse. Do not stop. But the ground itself seems to resist. Roads are clogged with refugees and wreckage. Each delay drains more fuel. Panthers sit idling, their drivers glancing nervously at gauges that read 1/4, then 1/8. Peiper climbs out of his half-track to survey the horizon. The flames at Stavelot still paint the underside of the clouds orange. It looks like the sky itself is bleeding. They can afford to burn 2 million gallons, he mutters, almost to himself. They burn what we would die for. On the Allied side, pilots in England watch weather reports. The storm that grounded them for days is lifting. Soon the skies will open, and the German advance, now trapped in valleys and villages, will be visible from miles above. Fuel, once the German lifeline, is about to become their beacon. December 19th. Morning. The German push slows to a crawl. At Chouapans, American engineers destroy another bridge just as Peiper's vanguard arrives. His tanks sit motionless in the snow, their crews cursing, staring at the twisted metal over the river. When reconnaissance reports yet another fuel dump ahead, 400,000 gallons near Stumont, Peiper sends his fastest units forward. But they arrive too late again. Another inferno. Another deliberate sacrifice. The sky turns black as the Americans burn their own abundance to deny it to him. The smell carries for miles. It's the scent of defeat disguised as victory, gasoline and loss. Peiper orders his men to search nearby for any unburned barrels. They find a handful in a barn, just enough to move a few more miles. The rest of the column remains stranded. He gathers his officers inside a ruined farmhouse. Maps spread across a table still dusted with flour from someone's forgotten kitchen. How much fuel remains, he asks. 8,000 gallons, perhaps, Gruner answers. Not enough to reach the Meuse. Maybe enough to hold position. Peiper looks around the room. No one meets his eyes. They all understand, the offensive has already failed, though the fighting will drag on for weeks more. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and slow, muffling the world. The fire at Stavelot still burns somewhere behind them, casting a faint orange pulse against the night clouds. He closes his map and whispers, "We'll dig in at Logleys. Make a stand there." The others nod. There is no alternative. That night, the valley flickers with the light of burning depots and vehicles. The Germans have become shadows trapped in a corridor of fire, their stolen fuel gone, their machines freezing solid. In a single week, the Allies have destroyed over 8 million gallons of gasoline rather than let it fall into enemy hands. The waste is staggering. The power behind it even more so. American quartermaster records will later note the numbers with dry precision. Stavelot, 2,189,000 gallons. Spa, 1,500,000. Chouapans, 3 million. Stumont, 1,300,000. For Peiper, each statistic is another nail in the coffin of his offensive. For the men watching the flames from Logleys, it's proof that their enemy's strength is limitless. In the days that follow, the weather clears. Allied fighter-bombers return to the skies. Columns of smoke mark every German position. Fuel trucks, half hidden under trees, erupt into fireballs under rocket attack. One Panther crew, caught in open ground, abandons its tank and watches as it explodes, a plume of black smoke twisting into the frozen air. "So ends our war," one of them says quietly. By December 19th, the offensive's momentum is gone. Kampfgruppe Peiper, once the tip of Hitler's final spear, now sits encircled, its engines cold, its tanks lifeless. Still, the men fight on, defending the wreckage of Log-Lees with rifles and machine guns, the great armored beasts around them now nothing more than steel monuments to ambition. At night, the forest glows faintly from distant fires. The air smells of oil and snow and smoke. The sound of Allied artillery echoes endlessly, like the ticking of a clock counting down what remains of the German dream. When dawn breaks on December 20th, Peiper stands on the hill above Log-Lees. Below him, the valley is shrouded in mist. The burned-out husks of his tanks lie half-buried in snow. He can still see the faint plume of smoke from Stavelot in the distance, the last memory of the fuel that could have carried them to the Meuse. He doesn't speak. There's nothing left to say. The silence feels heavier than any explosion. It's the sound of realization, that the war has already shifted, that the power to move, to act, to dream, now belongs entirely to the other side. Behind him, the men prepare to abandon the vehicles and retreat on foot. They will leave behind 135 tanks and trucks, and with them, the last gasp of Germany's armored might. The fire has burned out. What remains is futility. Tomorrow will bring encirclement. Then surrender. Then the long, cold walk east through snow and shame. But for now, in the frozen silence above Log-Lees, Peiper looks west one last time, toward the river he never reached, and whispers into the wind, "We ran out of fire." December 20th, 1944. The Ardennes lies buried beneath a foot of snow. The forest that once hid tanks and columns now glows faintly with the reflection of flames. At Log-Lees, the wind bites through the uniforms of men who were once the spearhead of Hitler's final gamble. Kampfgruppe Peiper, what's left of it, huddles in the ruins of the village. Their tanks stand motionless, engines frozen, exhaust pipes packed with ice. The great Tiger IIs that once thundered through Honsfeld now rest like monuments to a vanished power. Inside a farmhouse turned command post, Peiper leans over a map lit by a flickering oil lamp. His eyes are bloodshot from smoke and sleeplessness. Around him, his officers argue in low, ragged voices. The radio crackles with distant orders from 6th SS Panzer Army, terse, hopeless messages that still demand, hold position. But everyone knows the truth, they are surrounded. American infantry from the 30th Division has sealed the northern road. The 82nd Airborne controls the west. To the east, engineers have blown every bridge that might lead to safety. They are boxed in, a steel fist now clenched against itself. Outside, the air is filled with the steady whine of Allied fighter-bombers. Each pass drops more bombs onto the valley. Every explosion shakes the ground, sending dust down from the rafters. Peiper doesn't flinch anymore. He simply marks another crater on the map and listens to the ticking of his wristwatch. The hands move, indifferent. In the town below, civilians move like ghosts among the ruins. The smell of fuel and burning wood lingers everywhere. A single American shell has cracked the church bell tower, leaving it leaning awkwardly over the square. Inside, soldiers share their last rations, a handful of bread, a few cubes of sugar stolen from abandoned supply trucks. One man, Corporal Otto Reinhardt, writes in his journal by candlelight, "We are cold, hungry, and alone. The tanks are silent now. They have become our shelters. We sleep beneath them, not inside. Their steel is warmer than the air." He pauses, stares at the ink freezing in the bottle, then adds one more line, "We will not reach the Meuse. We will not even reach home." By December 21st, Allied artillery rings Log-Lees from 3 sides. The thunder never stops. Shells fall on the outskirts, then creep closer by the hour. Houses crumble into piles of brick and snow. The surviving Panthers are positioned as bunkers, their crews manning machine guns from the open hatches. When daylight comes, the temperature rises briefly, turning the snow to slush. The smell of decay and burned fuel returns. Then, as night falls again, the cold returns sharper than before, freezing the mud into stone. Peiper's men now fight not for victory, but for survival, to hold until nightfall, to see another dawn. Far to the west, Allied command rooms buzz with radio reports. General Hodges and his staff track the German Bulge hour by hour. To them, Peiper's name has become shorthand for the last dangerous point of the German offensive, a spear tip they intend to break off. Patton's Third Army is already pivoting north. Eisenhower's staff knows the outcome is sealed, it's only a matter of time and weather. In the skies above the Ardennes, C-47s fly in long, silver lines, the air resupply missions that keep American divisions alive in Bastogne. Each flight reminds the German soldiers below of what they no longer have: control, fuel, hope. On December 22, Peiper sends his last radio message. It's brief, almost defiant: ammunition and fuel exhausted. Heavy casualties. Holding La Gleize. There is no reply. That night, he gathers his officers again. The oil lamp sputters, throwing long shadows on the walls. His voice is calm, colder than the air outside. We can hold another day. Maybe two. After that, we march east. No vehicles, no wounded. Anyone who can walk. No one argues. They simply nod. Outside, the men prepare for what they already understand: the end. They strip machine guns from frozen tanks, gather the last ammunition, and load what food they can carry. The snow crunches under their boots like broken glass. In the distance, the Americans are closing in, their flares rising like stars over the trees. December 23. Dawn breaks pale and brittle. The roar of artillery has stopped for the moment, replaced by the soft hum of engines, Shermans moving into position. Through the smoke, American infantry advances cautiously, house by house. Peiper's men fire from windows, from basements, from the hulks of tanks half buried in snow. But it's hopeless. For every German gun, there are 10 American ones. By midday, La Gleize is encircled completely. The last Tiger II fires its final shell and falls silent, its barrel glowing faintly red. When the Americans finally enter the village, they find the streets empty, only abandoned vehicles and footprints leading east through the snow. Peiper and 800 of his men have slipped away under cover of night, abandoning 135 vehicles, including 30 tanks, to the enemy. They march for 18 hours through frozen forests, harried by American patrols, sleeping standing up in ditches. One survivor would later recall, "The snow turned pink where men fell. We carried no wounded, only rifles. Every sound felt louder than life itself." December 24, Christmas Eve. As the sun rises over the Ardennes, the last survivors of Kampfgruppe Peiper cross back into German lines near One. They are hollow-eyed, frostbitten, and half-starved. Some can barely walk. Peiper himself arrives on foot, his uniform stiff with ice. He reports to his superior, Sepp Dietrich, with what's left of his composure. "Report?" Dietrich asks. Peiper answers quietly, "No fuel. No men. No victory." Dietrich says nothing. There's nothing to say. The offensive, Hitler's final gamble in the West, is broken. In the days that follow, the Allied counteroffensive regains every inch of ground the Germans had taken. The fires at Stavelot and Troisponts finally burn out, leaving behind seas of frozen black residue, millions of gallons of wasted fuel that never powered a single tank. War correspondents who visit the area describe the smell as unforgettable: burnt rubber, diesel, and death. For the villagers who return, the landscape feels alien: forests stripped bare, rivers choked with wreckage. In La Gleize, the great Tiger II still sits where it was abandoned, its barrel pointing west, a frozen monument to hubris. It remains there to this day. In Berlin, Hitler rages at the failure, blaming weather, command, even fate. But history will record the truth more simply: it was fuel. Always fuel. The German war machine that once conquered continents died not in battle, but in exhaustion, strangled by the same resource it had sought so desperately. For Peiper's men, the realization came too late. Their story, From the lightning strike at Honsfeld to the inferno at Stavelot, the encirclement at La Glise, and the final, freezing retreat, is the story of a war that had already been lost, written in gasoline and snow. Winter holds the Ardennes until March. Snow drifts hide the wrecks. Then, as spring comes, the roads open again, revealing the twisted skeletons of tanks that never made it home. In time, the forests regrow. The villages rebuild. But the scars remain. And for those who survived, the memories return with every winter wind, the sound of engines dying, the glow of fire reflected in the snow, the taste of smoke and frost. For all their ambition, all their speed and fire, it ended not with victory or glory, but with silence, the silence of 1,000 frozen machines, each one a monument to the moment when history itself ran out of fuel.